We are about to see a special season from Lando Norris. After years of being linked with Red Bull and the perfect opportunity arising to replace Sergio Perez, Lando Norris has signed a new deal with the McLaren team. But if he's so desperate to win races, why has he turned down the most dominant team in Formula 1 history to stay with a team that's only won one race in recent years? Let's delve into why he turned down Red Bull, what made him stay at McLaren, and if he's finally ready to win races and challenge for championships. We all know that Lando Norris is absolutely desperate for that first win, however it may come. In recent seasons, his level of driving has continued to increase year on year. He's shown that he has exceptional speed, incredible adaptability, his tyre management is at the level of other top drivers on the grid, and last season in particular, I feel like we saw a big step forward in terms of his racecraft, to the extent that every time he went for a move, I just trusted he would make it happen, which is not the case for a few other drivers on the grid. And yes, I know he made mistakes. I know in qualifying last year he came under a lot of criticism, but he always came out and held his hands up. And I think that self-critical nature drives the continuous improvement that we have seen from Lando Norris. And despite having a less competitive car, he was constantly the closest competitor to Max Verstappen last season. And we have to remember, there have been a few close calls. I think back to Monza in 2021, where he finished behind Daniel Ricciardo, who picked up that win for the McLaren team. If it wasn't Daniel Ricciardo in front of him, or more specifically, if it wasn't his teammate in front of him, I feel like he would have been given that opportunity to really go for that victory and probably would have gotten it. And then the one that everybody brings up is of course Sochi in 2021, where I feel like the loss of the victory there really can be attributed to the team's communication, plus a little bit of Lando Norris's naivety, rather than seeing it as the driver's weakness under pressure, which some people say it was. Plus, both of those opportunities came over 2 seasons ago. And in those 2 seasons, I would argue that Lando Norris is now a completely different prospect, being a much more established member of the grid and also just a much more well-rounded driver. And I feel like those opportunities, if they were presented to the Lando Norris that we saw towards the end of the 2023 season, the story would be a lot different. Of course, there's always going to be little pieces of evidence that go against his championship potential, but I genuinely feel like coming into the 2024 season, any of those little flaws that are still in his driving would be resolved by being handed a fully competitive car. For me, there were only 2 things that stopped him from winning races in 2023. First, the inconsistency of the McLaren car, which, let's face it, for the first 10 races of the season was nowhere near good enough to win races, and even after the upgrade in Austria, there were still weekends where the McLaren car really fluctuated in terms of its overall performance. But realistically, the main reason that Lando Norris didn't pick up a win last season was the reason that most other drivers didn't pick up a win last season. The Red Bull car was so far clear of the rest of the field, especially in the hands of Max Verstappen, that winning a race was almost impossible for anyone other than the Dutchman. Which is why I think it's so interesting that with Lando Norris in the form that he is in right now, and with his previous contract expiring in 2025, has decided to take the jump and commit to McLaren for an extra few seasons so early, when it looked like there was a possibility of taking a seat in the most dominant Formula 1 car we've possibly ever seen. It's well known at this point that everybody at Red Bull is a massive fan of Lando Norris. Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, and even Max Verstappen has come out and talked incredibly highly of the British driver. I think it's clear if Lando Norris really wanted to go to Red Bull, the Austrian outfit would have no problem displacing Sergio Perez and handing Norris the keys, especially considering Lando Norris's rise through the 2023 season pretty much perfectly coincided with Sergio Perez's real struggle to get to grips with the updated Red Bull car. I mean, considering how quick the RB19 was, it should have been Sergio Perez joining Max Verstappen on the podium consistently. But instead, the Mexican was being replaced by Lando Norris on the podium more often than not. So you can understand why Red Bull may have wanted to replace him in the car as well. And in fact, this speculation around Lando Norris joining the Red Bull family isn't a recent thing. Red Bull considered Lando Norris to replace Brendan Hartley in 2018, when Lando was still battling for the Formula 2 title with George Russell and Alex Albon. But at the time, Lando was still part of the McLaren Driver Academy, and the McLaren team made sure that Lando Norris was very aware that he was going to be promoted into their Formula 1 setup for the 2019 season. So we all know that Red Bull have followed him closely. I mean, Lando Norris himself has even acknowledged some of this speculation and said that he's enjoyed being linked to Red Bull. He took it as a compliment, right? You're being linked to a a race seat in a team that's winning races and winning championships. And if anything, it was an easy ticket to basically guarantee himself at least a few race wins over the next few seasons. So if that's the case and you've got a team that's winning races consistently offering you a race seat, why would you say no? There have been a few discussions of the fact that going into the Red Bull team, you'd obviously be alongside Max Verstappen. I've even heard some people say that Lando Norris would be scared to go up against Max Verstappen in the same car, which I don't really buy. Lando, of course, knows the quality of Max Verstappen. He's mentioned multiple times how impressed he was by Max's driving in that car, but I don't think he's scared. I think it's more the fact that he knows if he goes into his team, he would be playing catch up to Max Verstappen, who's already integrated into their setup as their #1 driver and knows the Red Bull car inside and out. But still at the same time, I don't think Lando Norris would be scared. I think Lando Norris would back himself, especially as the Red Bull car is suited to Max, and Max has a very similar style to Lando. So I think there's a little more nuance to it. Why choose McLaren then? Well, under Andrea Stella's leadership, McLaren experienced a remarkable in-season boost in performance in 2023, which, remember, came after a 2022 season where we saw a lot of change, both in terms of the drivers and behind the scenes at McLaren. And you point towards other teams like Alpine, for instance, it's clear that sometimes change isn't always going to lead to more success. But I think with Andrea stepping up within the team and being the main man now, what he's brought is such a harmony to McLaren, and it's clear that now more than ever, especially within the time that Lando Norris has been with the team, they seem set up to actually aim for a world championship win. And on top of that, I just feel like Andrea Stella is the perfect person for a driver like Lando Norris, who is self-critical, who does want to improve every single time he's behind the wheel, and now he can look to a boss who has worked with characters like Michael Schumacher, Kimi Räikkönen, and Fernando Alonso. And I just think Andrea Stella would have been a huge factor when it came to Lando Norris believing that his potential can be better realized in that McLaren team environment. And within McLaren, they can design a car that he can align with, extract performance from, and show the best of his talents. However, beyond just the team principle, the McLaren setup is also adapting and improving massively. In terms of infrastructure, we've seen a new simulator added, which will help the team no end with things like setup and understanding the characteristics of their car on different circuits, which they've needed to do for so long, as well as a brand new wind tunnel finally coming online, something the team have been desperate for as long as I can remember. It means that aerodynamic upgrades can be brought way more often, but secondarily, they can be understood much more because they aren't having to send a part halfway across Europe, wait for the testing to be done, and then bring it back again. Instead, they can do it all in-house. And let's not forget, this new infrastructure also comes along with some incredible new hires for the McLaren team, which Lando Norris would have only just met fully, considering both of them were on gardening leave until the 1st of January. Rob Marshall has left Red Bull after 17 years with the team, most recently as their chief technical officer, to take over the role as technical director for engineering and design with McLaren. And after 11 years with Ferrari, David Sanchez has returned to McLaren as technical director for car concept and performance. These are two incredible names to add to your behind the scenes team, and the fact that they'll now be making up 2 of the 3 technical directors for McLaren must be a tantalizing prospect for the drivers right now, because both of them have been part of incredible things with other massive Formula 1 teams on the grid. Which is why I think that the McLaren team have been able to convince Lando Norris that McLaren offers him the best chance of winning regularly and competing for championships in the future. Despite Red Bull's consistent interest in him and the fact that he could go to the Red Bull team and win races almost instantly, staying at McLaren, being the cog that runs the McLaren machine and takes them to the next level in the long term, will firstly be more rewarding, but secondly offers up the chance for it to be his team. So whilst Lando Norris is incredibly happy at McLaren and feels part of the family and trusts in the team's trajectory, he also knows that if he is the driver to return McLaren to winning races and fighting for championships, that holds so much more weight than moving to Red Bull and winning a few races whilst Max Verstappen goes on to win another couple of championships. As I mentioned before, Lando Norris's commitment to the McLaren team comes nearly 24 months before the end of his previous deal, but Lando Norris's commitment provides confidence to the McLaren team that he chose them over the other top teams. I also mentioned before how Lando Norris himself kind of joked about the links with Red Bull, but I think he realized that actually quashing those rumors of a Red Bull switch was better for him in the long term. It reassures the team and eliminates any doubts about his loyalty to them for the future, meaning that they can be happy knowing that they're working for a driver that is committed to them. Plus, signing a new multi-year contract with McLaren avoids him being part of the very volatile Formula One driver market that is set to blow up over the next couple of seasons through 2025 and into the new regulations of 2026, which provides him with stability and aligns him with other drivers that he wants to be grouped with in Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, who have also got their situations sorted out for the future. Having said all that, I suppose the only thing that you could argue in terms of that commitment is that unlike Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, we haven't actually seen the McLaren car challenge properly for race wins on a consistent basis in a very long time, which is why I think the contract that Lando Norris has signed seems to be a little bit shorter, only going up until the end of the 2026 season. Because remember, Lando Norris is still very young, and whilst that contract does still show that Lando Norris has confidence in McLaren, it also ensures that he isn't trapped there for, I don't know, 5+ years if the team's progress does falter. As with everything in Formula One, the devil will be in the detail, and the most significant impact on this deal and Lando Norris's career will probably be in things that we as the public unfortunately aren't able to see. Because it feels like Lando Norris might have given himself a little bit of leeway to exit McLaren if the team doesn't progress towards those regular wins and championship challenges, which, let's face it, he deserves. But I think it's fair to say that both McLaren and Lando Norris still have much to prove on the Formula One grid, and with this contract, at least for the foreseeable future, Lando Norris and the McLaren team can focus on maintaining the team's upward trajectory over the next couple of seasons. Whilst this early commitment isn't a cage to keep Lando Norris within, it ensures a clear pathway for the team as they hit the new rules in 2026 without any contractual uncertainties. They have both of their drivers in Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri signed up and ready to go for the first season of the new regulations in 2026, which means their sole focus as a team can be purely performance related. They're set up in a way now that they have the drivers, they have the technical staff, and they have the infrastructure to kick on and do incredible things. All of the evidence suggests that they are on the verge of doing something really special together. But I'd love to know what you think. What do you think McLaren and Lando Norris can achieve over the next 3 years together? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, I also made this video here on why Alpine seem to be a Formula One team that has everything required to win races, but is stuck in the middle of nowhere on the Formula One grid. So click that link and I'll see you over there.